during the class. Try not to. You can make a skit about the view of the transitory collection. Uh-oh. Okay, so let's do our prayers. And then we'll do a little bit of meditation.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, who with your bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Okay. Okay, so just as we just recited in the prayer of Refuge of Bodhicitta, have the intention, the motivation to be here, participate in this class in order to create the causes for enlightenment, to become a fully awakened, fully enlightened being who is able to help all other sentient beings become free of suffering and the causes of suffering, and for them to reach liberation and enlightenment as well. So let's do a little meditation on how ignorance, like the view of the transitory collection and other types of ignorance, grasping at things as inherently existing, how that mind leads to the afflictions that disturb our mind and our life and keep us stuck in samsara. So there's a sequence. It can happen really fast, but there are steps that happen. So first, our aggregates, our body and mind, or just part of our aggregates appears to our mind. And based on that appearance, a valid sense of I arises. This is the mere I, the I that is merely designated in dependence on the aggregates. So a mind, a conceptual mind, sees an I that is merely imputed or merely designated in dependence on the aggregates. And that's valid, that's not wrong and correct. But then, observing this mere I, merely designated I, ignorance, which has been in our mind from beginningless time, our mind is heavily familiar with it. So ignorance erroneously grasps at this mere I to exist inherently. Not just merely designated on the aggregates, but existing on its own, from its own side, able to set itself up, really there, real and solid. So that is the view of the transitory collection, or view of the personal self. So it's a form of ignorance, one specific type of ignorance that is related to our own I, our own self. And based on that, grasping at an inherently existing I, then there's also grasping at mine. This is the sense of ownership we have regarding our body, our feelings, our things, and so on. So the I that owns these things is the possessor of these things. So it's still a sense of self, a sense of I, but more in the position of being an owner. So that is another form of the view of the transitory collection, another type of ignorance. And so once we have those two kinds of ignorance, grasping at a real I and a real mine, then other afflictions arise. We have attachment toward the things we regard as mine, like our body, our possessions, and so on, and also people we like. So attachment arises towards those. And aversion or anger arise toward people and things that we don't like, that annoy us, or that we regard as harmful or bad. And there's jealousy and arrogance or pride and a whole range of other afflictive emotions. So these are all based on this wrong conception about ourself, our I, and the my that owns things. And under the influence of these afflictions, we create the karma that throws us back into rebirth again and again, life after life. So it's good to apply antidotes to afflictions like attachment and aversion so that we can reduce them. But as long as ignorance is there, as long as we're still under the influence of this grasping at a real I and a real mine, and seeing everyone and everything else as real, inherently existing, as long as that ignorance is still there, still in our mind, then we can never become completely free of suffering, free of samsara. And our ability to help others will be limited. We won't be able to really help them become free either. So see if you can generate this strong wish, aspiration to learn how to eliminate ignorance in order to free yourself from samsara and reach Buddhahood, become fully awakened, fully enlightened, so that you can help all other beings, all the kind mother and father sentient beings from samsara, and help them reach enlightenment as well. So, just one thing to clear up from last week. At the end of the class, Venerable Pema asked a question about the order of explaining the two types of selflessness in Chandrakirti's entering the middle way, and also Shantideva's engaging in bodhisattva deeds. And I think she said it wrong way around. She agreed. So I want to set the record straight. So Chandrakirti, in his text, Entering the Middle Way, he first explains selflessness of phenomena using this reasoning that's called diamond slivers. It's a reasoning that talks about production. They always talk about sprouts. They use the example of sprouts, probably because there were lots of fields around and things growing, so it's an easy example to use. So if you take a sprout, how is that produced? There's 4 possible ways. It can be produced from, and it's talking about not just conventional, but ultimate, like is a sprout produced inherently? Is there an inherently existing sprout produced in an inherently existing way? And if that was the case, there were 4 possibilities. One is it's produced from itself. It produces itself. Or the second is from others, but that means inherently existing others, like inherently existing cause producing an inherently existing result. So is that how the sprout arises? The third possibility is both, self and others. And the fourth is no cause. Just comes into existence without any causes. So this is about production of, this is about selflessness of phenomena, things like sprouts and, cars and bodies and so on. Phenomena other than persons. And he spends a lot of time, a lot of pages and verses talking about that one. And then only after that he talks about the selflessness of persons. And actually Nagarjuna does the same. In his text, it's sometimes called the Treatise on the Middle Way or Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, that really important text that everybody makes commentaries to. So also, I haven't studied that text, but I was looking at Ocean of Reasoning, the book, which is a translation of, it has Nagarjuna's root text plus Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to it. And I'm just looking at the table of contents. And there's many chapters, I can't remember how many chapters, but selflessness of persons seems to only come in chapter 18. And the first 17 chapters appear to be about selflessness of phenomena, right? I mean, he also uses that, talks about that reasoning, the diamond slivers. I think that's right in the first chapter. So those 2 texts start with selflessness of phenomena and then selflessness of persons afterwards. And Shantideva, in his engaging in the bodhisattva deeds, in chapter 9, that's where he talks about the perfection of wisdom. So he starts with selflessness of persons. He teaches that first in verse 9.57. Then afterwards talks about selflessness of phenomena from 9.78 onwards. So Shantideva starts with selflessness of persons and then selflessness of phenomena. And Lama Tsongkhapa follows that order as well in this text, and also Lamrim Chanmo, great Lamrim. So there's actually something about this point that will come at the end of this chapter. We might get there today. So hang on, hold your breath. No, don't hold your breath. It'll take a while to get there. Hold your horses. Okay, so we'll continue where we left off last time. Page 342, towards the bottom. So this is the section on, I forget, what's the title of this section? It's called Demonstrating that It, meaning ignorance, is the root of revolving and cyclic existence. And he's specifically talking about ignorance that grasps things as inherently existing. So there's this verse from 60 Stanzas of Reasoning, Nagarjuna's text, which says, "Why would the great venom, afflictions, not arise in those whose minds have a basis for it?" So I think basis here refers to ignorance. So if there's ignorance in the mind, then why wouldn't the afflictions arise? Even when it is an ordinary object, they are seized by the snake of the mental afflictions. In the commentary, these lines are explained as above. So, yeah, if you have ignorance in your mind, then afflictions will arise, the great venom of the afflictions. And the intended meaning of precious garland, so this is referring to that verse in the precious garland where Nagarjuna talks about how as long as you apprehend the aggregates, then you apprehend an I. So if you see the aggregates as inherently existing, then you'll also have the sense of an inherently existing I. So that's how he explains the order of those two arising. So the intended meaning of precious garland also appears to be that the view of the transitory collection arises from apprehending the aggregates as truly existing or inherently existing. The way the remaining mental afflictions arise should be inferred and understood from the explanations in the context of persons of medium capacity. So back in that section of the Lamrim, then there's an explanation of the order of afflictions arising based on ignorance. Also, commentary on Compendium of Valid Cognition, this is Dharmakirti's text, says, "He who sees a self will always adhere to what he refers to as I. Through that adherence, there's craving for happiness. Through that craving, faults are obscured. There is strong craving when excellence is seen. The mind is grasped as that which achieves it. As long as there is attachment to self, one will thus revolve in cyclic existence." So Lama Tsongkhapa gives some explanation below. He says, you should come to understand it that way. And he says, although this system, I think he's talking about the system of Dharmakirti, which is kind of a combination of Sautrantika and Chittamatra. Those are the tenet systems that Dharmakirti followed. So that his system differs from the way the above explanation posits the two apprehensions of a self, meaning our system, which is prasangika. So there are some differences between Dharmakirti's system of tenets and ours. You should come to understand the stages of how the mental afflictions arise depending on it, meaning the grasping itself. Initially, attachment to the self arises once the observed object of the thought I is apprehended as established by way of its intrinsic characteristics. So what is the observed object of the thought I? The mere I. Good. Okay, so that's like what we just did in the meditation. First, there's the mere I based on the aggregates, the I that's merely designated on the aggregates. So there's the mere I, And then when that is apprehended as established by way of its intrinsic characteristics, or also known as inherently existing. So once there's grasping at the mere I as being inherently existing, that generates craving for the self's happiness. So once there's a real I want to be happy. Yeah, grasp. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy. That's not a bad thing, right? According to Buddhism, we shouldn't feel bad or guilty about wanting to be happy. We should be happy. But if it's craving, if there's craving involved, that's the problem. So there's craving for the self's happiness. However, since there is no independent happiness for the self that does not depend on what is mine, to be happy, we feel I have to have things, right? I have to have friends, I have to have food, money, comfort, and so on. So then there's craving for mine, the I that is the owner, I own this and this and this and this, and then craving for that. That obscures the faults in what is identified as mine and causes one to see excellent qualities in it. Okay, so, the things we have attachment to, like our body and our possessions and so on, aren't perfect. They're samsaric things. They're in the nature of suffering, dukkha, impermanent, and probably foul as well, not able to really give us satisfaction. And so, but we don't see that. So the craving prevents us from seeing the faults in those things. Consequently, mine is grasped as something that achieves the self's happiness. So we grasp at, there's a lot of discussion about what the mind refers to. It's not the things that are mine, but rather the mind, the owner of those things. But you could say that both, that we, we see both the things that we own as well as the owner as something that will bring us happiness. These are things that will bring happiness to me, and so we have craving for them. And then karma comes along. So karma is committed owing to the mental afflictions that arise like this. Through that karma, one is again reborn in cyclic existence. Here's another text by Nagarjuna called 70 Stanzas on Emptiness that says, karma has mental afflictions as its cause. Karmic formations derive from the afflictions. The body has karma as its cause. Those three are empty of a nature, meaning inherently existing nature. So there's kind of a process here. So there's mental afflictions. Those come first. Those are the cause for karma. And then karma leads to having a body, like our body, samsaric body. So this is like in the 12 links we first have. Although the afflictions aren't really mentioned in the 12 links, it mentions ignorance. The first of the 12 links is ignorance. And I guess it's just implied that ignorance leads to afflictions, and then afflictions lead to karma. And then karma leads to rebirth, having another samsaric body that experiences dukkha. And they're all empty of inherent existence. Okay, you should train in this manner to gain certainty regarding the stages of revolving and cyclic existence. Any questions about that section before we go off to on to the next one? You've probably heard this many times before from Venerable. How we still forget. Yeah.
So knowing that Dharmakirti is coming from the approach of the Chittamatra and you said the Sautranta.
Yeah.
How does that inform that verse, or how does that inform the way that we're looking at this selflessness of phenomena?
Well, in his system or systems, there's no mention of grasping at inherent existence. In fact, they assert, they affirm inherent existence. But he still talks about ignorance. All the Buddhist schools actually say that there's ignorance, and ignorance about ourself, our I, and that leads to afflictions. So that's correct. But when it comes to identifying, well, what exactly is that ignorance? So for Dharmakirti, it would be grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. For Nagarjuna and Lama Tsongkhapa, our system, it would be grasping at an inherently existing I. So there's still some kind of grasping at an I. It's just that the Prasangikas go deeper. They see a deeper level of grasping at I, an incorrect view of the I. So that's what he says. There are some differences regarding the two apprehensions of a self between Dharmakirti's system and our system. There's some differences, but still the stages of how the afflictions arise. They often quote Dharmakirti in various Lamrim and so on.
This is another one of those questions I've always had, so maybe I don't know. But again, just seeing how the presentation is given in a different order, that some of them give the selflessness of persons first, and then some of them give the selflessness of phenomena first.
You mean how they explain
it,
in the text.
Right. Yeah. So there is that variety, and yet when it comes down to the meditation on it, they always say that meditating on the selflessness of the person must come first, or is the way to do it. And in a way that doesn't make sense to me.
It does. No, it doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
But and then when I see that this variety is here, I just wonder if you've ever heard an explanation about that.
I was wondering if somewhere there is an explanation of why Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti have one order, and then Shantideva, Lama Tsongkhapa, and so on have another order. I just looked quickly at volumes 7 and 8. Volume 8 is where all the different reasonings are given. I just had a quick look and I didn't see anything there, but maybe somewhere there's an explanation of that. And I had this thought, I could be completely wrong, but maybe this statement about how you have to realize emptiness of self first before emptiness of phenomena. Maybe this is a Tibetan thing. I don't know. It's possible. Have you heard anything?
I just have my own wondering because they're writing these texts, they're refuting prevalent erroneous tenets of the day. Mm-hmm. That perhaps that's what dictated what they were focusing on.
But then on the other hand, the view of a permanent unitary independent self was very strong in well, in India, I mean, and still, that kind of view of a real I, a real self, a soul, an Atman, that's very strong in Indian traditions. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's possible. But yeah, at the time of Nagarjuna, at the time of Chandrakirti, maybe there were views about how phenomena are produced and that they really wanted to focus on and show that were incorrect. And there was something, it was actually in Jeffrey's book, the exposition, final exposition of, what is it? The one which contains, his translation of this. Final exposition of wisdom. Yeah, maybe I can find it. But he mentioned it in a footnote when His Holiness was teaching. Maybe this isn't relevant. He was teaching in 1972 and mentioned that. I'll have to look it up. I forget now. Something about how most Buddhist schools, all the Buddhist schools, understand that the self. Oh, that's right. This whole idea that it's easier to realize the emptiness of a self or an I than it is to realize the emptiness of phenomena. And he said it could be because all the Buddhist schools agree that the self is imputed, a person is imputed. They don't say merely imputed. The Prasangikas say merely imputed, so that adds another dimension to it. But all the Buddhist schools agree that, a self, a person is imputed on the aggregates. And so maybe from that, because of that was His Holiness' suggestion that, for Buddhists who already have that idea that the self is imputed on the aggregates, then it's easy to realize how it's merely imputed and not inherently existing. I've heard that from other teachers as well. Others have said that as well. They say, oh, it's really easy to realize the emptiness of a self because it's obviously just imputed. And we go like, huh? I mean, we're not brought up with that idea. but yeah, if you're kind of raised in a Buddhist family, in a Buddhist system, Buddhist culture, then maybe you know that idea is easy for you to accept. But His Holiness said that, so that might be the reason why they say. And also, what I once asked one of my teachers, I think it was maybe Khensa Jama Tekchok, about this. And, because I said, well, things like a car, easy to see how that, you can't really find anything among all the parts that's the car, and you can't find the car separate from the parts. So that's kind of easy to see. There's no, real car there. And he said, but when they talk about selflessness of phenomena, it's mainly about our aggregates. Not so much external things like cars, but mainly our aggregates. And they say it is harder to see how the aggregates are merely labeled, merely imputed. Yeah, mind. Tricky one. Anyway, we'll be getting to that later. We're getting soon. Soon we'll be to the selflessness of persons. A few more pages. Okay, so then we start a new section. The need to seek the view of selflessness if you wish to eliminate the apprehension of a self. This has 2 points. The reason you need to seek the view that realizes selflessness if you wish to eliminate that ignorance, and to how to generate the view that realizes selflessness. Okay, so we've already identified ignorance. What is the ignorance that is the target that we're, trying to get rid of, because that is the root of samsara, the source of all suffering. So that's been identified. So now if we want to get rid of that ignorance, if we're convinced that we can do much better without it, then how to do that? We have to seek the view that realizes selflessness. So he says, it is necessary to want the extinction wherein the ignorance explained above as the twofold apprehension of a self has been eliminated. That we have to want to get rid of that. One may deem it necessary and even appear to want it, but one who wants to but does not put effort into understanding how apprehending a self becomes the root of cyclic existence has very dull faculties. So I guess he's talking about people who, who say, oh yeah, I really have to get rid of that ignorance, and maybe even appear like they want to do it, but don't put any effort into it. Yeah, keep themselves... Well, we're probably putting some effort into it. But yeah, I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in things for this life and not put effort into understanding it. So does someone who does not put effort into generating the pure view of selflessness in his or her mind stream, despite partial insight into this, having thoroughly refuted the object grasped by the apprehension of a self with scriptures of definitive meaning as well as reasonings. So that sounds like someone who has partially gone along this direction, maybe in the monastery. They've studied Chandrakirti and other texts, giving reasonings, maybe even debated, and got a really good intellectual understanding of these various reasonings, and, even managed to refute the object of negation, but then they still don't put effort into increasing that and getting to the point where they have the actual realization of emptiness. So there's probably a lot of people who fall into that category as well. Get busy doing other things after they graduate from the monastery. So that's possible. So that is because he has lost the vital essence of the path that leads to liberation and omniscience, and yet remains indifferent about that. Not, kind of uncaring about it. This is why the glorious Dharmakirti said, without their objects being disproven, they cannot possibly be abandoned. Meaning, what needs to be abandoned are the two types of grasping at self. And if we don't disprove the objects, the conceived objects, Jeffrey had in parentheses, the conceived objects of those minds, like the inherently existing self and the inherently existing phenomena. So those are the conceived objects of the two kinds of self-grasping. So without disproving those, without proving those to be false, we can't abandon those wrong views, those types of selflessness. Abandoning desire, hatred, and so forth, connected with excellent qualities and faults, requires not seeing these in objects and not some external approach. So there's some explanation of this lower down. He says, when removing an external object of elimination, such as a thorn that has pierced your skin, you can completely remove it by means of something like a needle, independently of negating the object caught in this manner. So if you get a thorn, we get a thorn in our flesh, all we have to do is take some instrument like a needle or tweezers and pull it out. We don't have to go through a process of refuting an object of negation, proving to ourselves that it doesn't exist. That's not necessary. But when eliminating an internal mental object of abandonment, like an inherently existing I, however, you cannot do it like this. That's a different process. You can't just pull it out with tweezers, throw it away. Rather, you must eliminate it by seeing the non-existence in the object of the meaning apprehended, the apprehension, for instance, of a self. Okay, so to get rid of this internal mental object of abandonment, like inherently existing I, we have to see that it doesn't exist. We have to see that our self, the valid self, the conventionally existing self that is merely imputed on the aggregates, we have to see that there's no inherently existing self, as ignorance superimposes, throws this extra layer of inherent existence onto the self that does exist. So we have to see that extra layer, that's my own language, extra layer is not true. It's not really there. So that's what we have to do to get rid of ignorance. The glorious Chandrakirti also taught that once all the afflictions, such as attachment, and all the faults, such as birth, aging, and so forth, are seen to arise from the apprehension of a self, meaning, this mistaken grasping at an inherently existing self, the desire to negate and eliminate it will arise. At that point, the yogi negates with reasonings the object superimposed by the apprehension of a self, the self of a person. Entering the middle way clearly says, seeing with his wisdom that all faults and afflictions arise from the view of the transitory collection, a yogi knows the self to be its object and performs the negation of the self. So their self is referring to the inherently existing self, the one that doesn't exist, that's sort of superimposed onto the mere I. So have to negate that. In fact, that is what someone who meditates on suchness must do. That is why it says a yogi. Yogi is someone who meditates. This approach is also the excellent thought of the protector Nagarjuna. He says in the 60 stanzas of reasoning that, referring to the grasping at inherent existence, is the cause of all the views, bad views, wrong views. Without it, afflictions do not arise. Therefore, if you thoroughly know this, views, meaning bad views, and afflictions are thoroughly purified. If you wonder how this is known, it is by seeing dependent arising. Yay, the hero, the weapon, our old friend. The supreme knower of suchness taught that things born dependently are unborn. Supreme knower of suchness, I think, refers to the Buddha. And so he taught that things born dependently are unborn, meaning, whatever arises dependently is not independently existing or inherently existing. That's what unborn means. He is pointing out that the apprehension of true existence, called asserting as things, I don't know where that comes from. I think that means asserting, that's right. The term here, I think, was ngopo, and Jeffrey translated that as inherent existence. So anyways, asserting inherent existence, we could say. So the apprehension of true existence, which is called asserting inherent existence, which is the cause of all afflicted views and all other mental afflictions, is eliminated through realizing the suchness of things, that they are not inherently arisen because they are dependently arisen. The insight that there is no such inherent existence does not arise without negating the object of the apprehension of things as inherently established. A statement by Aryadeva that accords with this was already quoted above. I think that was 338. Yeah, that was back on page 338, just about how we have to overcome ignorance, to overcome all the afflictions. In 400 stanzas, he also says, if selflessness is seen in objects, the seed of existence will cease. Now, existence, there's this term in Tibetan, sipa, which, yeah, I can translate it as existence, but it really means cyclic existence, samsara. Like, it's also in the 12 links. Which one is that? Number 10? 9, 10? Number 10. That means the root of existence, cyclic existence, ignorance, is cut by seeing that the object of observation grasped by the apprehension of a self lacks a self. So again, object of observation is the mere, like, in our view of transitory collection, it would be the mere I, which does exist, but that doesn't have inherent existence. The seemingly real, inherently existing I superimposed onto the mere I, that doesn't exist. So we have to see that in order to cut the root of cyclic existence. The Venerable Shantideva also says in his Compendium of Trainings, thus the emptiness of persons is thoroughly established, and since their root has been cut, all the mental afflictions do not arise at all. Wouldn't that be nice? Oh, wow. So peaceful. It is, as the Tathagata's Secrets Sutra says, Shanti Mati, it is like this. When a tree is cut at the root, all the branches, leaves, and twigs dry up. Likewise, Shanti Mati, when you fully pacify the view of the transitory collection, you also fully pacify all the mental afflictions and secondary mental afflictions. It's helpful to have analogies like that. We're talking about such abstract things, these mental states that are even hard to recognize. But using a tree, especially like they say, a poisonous tree. If there's a poisonous tree and every part of that tree is poisonous and harmful, and so, you can cut off the branches, the leaves, the fruits, and so on. But they'll just grow back again. New ones will grow. As long as the root is there, it will just grow back again. More poisonous stuff coming out. And so, but if you can cut the root, destroy the root, then there will be no more branches, leaves, and twigs, and so on. So in the same way, if we can get rid of this view of the transitory collection, is grasping at a real, inherently existing I, and then that will mean the end of our afflictions and our suffering. So this means that the view of the transitory collection is reversed through cultivating the realization of emptiness that sees the person as empty of inherent establishment or inherent existence. Once it is reversed, all other mental afflictions are also reversed. Furthermore, the realization of selflessness is impossible without negating the object of the apprehension of a self of persons. So we have to, recognize that object of negation, the seemingly real I, inherently existing I, and then refute it, negate it, which basically means realizing that it doesn't exist. It's something impossible to exist. And so we have to be convinced of that. The sutra passage points out that the view of the transitory collection is the root of all other mental afflictions. If it were different in meaning from ignorance, there would be two different roots of cyclic existence. Therefore, it should also be understood as ignorance. So that's going back to that thing we were talking about last week, where there was this doubt, are there two roots of cyclic existence or just one? Is ignorance and the view of transitory collection the same? So he's saying this sutra passage points out that, the view of the transitory collection is ignorance, kind of ignorance, and they're both the roots of cyclic existence. In brief, when the many supreme scholars who commented on the meaning of the profound scriptures determined the meaning of suchness, they carried out a thorough analysis by means of numerous scriptures and reasonings. They did so, having perceived that it is impossible to realize selflessness and emptiness without seeing that the self grasped by the erroneous apprehension does not exist, and without seeing that it is empty of that self. It is essential to gain certainty with regard to this. So it isn't enough just to stop thinking. Like, some people think, well, the way to realize emptiness is just stop thinking. Don't think anymore, and then you won't have any more conception of true existence. But Nagarjuna and, Lama Tsongkhapa, based on what Nagarjuna says and Chandrakirti says and Shantideva says no, that's not the way. That's not enough. You have to recognize this false I, the object of negation, and then refute it with reasons. If you don't do that, you can't realize selflessness and emptiness. If you do not meditate like this on the meaning of the negation of the erroneous object, that is, the root of being bound in cyclic existence, then even if you meditate on something else that you claim is profound, it will not harm the apprehension of a self at all. For unless the mind enters the suchness of selflessness and emptiness, the apprehension of a self cannot possibly be reversed. Also, if you do not negate the object of the apprehension of a self, you might hinder your mind from going toward its object, but that cannot be posited as entering selflessness. So I have a note to myself here saying, look at Jeffrey's his Jeffrey's translation says, without rejecting the object of the apprehension of self, although you perform the mere withdrawal of the mind that moves over there to its object, this cannot be posited as being absorbed in selflessness. It sounds like maybe he's referring to Hashang again. That tradition that says, just don't think about anything, don't pay attention to anything, just stop all mental activity, and then you'll realize emptiness and get enlightened. So just stopping the mind from going to objects, withdrawing our mind from moving to objects, that doesn't lead to the realization of selflessness. reason why is that when the mind engages an object, there are three possible apprehensions. First, an apprehension of that observed object as truly existent. Two, an apprehension of it as not truly existent. And three, an apprehension that does not qualify it as either of those two. So the first is where we, grasp an object like a cup as truly existing. And second, if someone has realized emptiness, they've gone through the process of reasoning, using reasons and so on, and actually got a realization of emptiness. So they would see the cup as not truly existing, doesn't truly exist. And then the third is neither of the two. You're just apprehending the object without grasping it as inherently existing or not inherently existing. Therefore, simply not apprehending something. So this sentence, I have to talk about this one. It says, therefore, simply not apprehending something as truly existent does not entail that you apprehend it as not truly existent. Jeffries is just the opposite, and so is the Tibetan. I looked at the Tibetan and it seems to say, so Jeffrey says, just as although one is not apprehending an object as not truly existent, one is not necessarily apprehending it as truly existent. Are you looking at the Tibetan? Anyone? No. Anyway, it seemed like the Tibetan was the opposite to what's written here. But I realized it doesn't matter, because the point he's making here is that I guess some people think there's only two possibilities. You either see the object as truly existent, or you see the object as not truly existent. So if you're not doing the first, then you're doing the second. Or if you're not doing the second, you're doing the first. But he's saying, it's not like that. There's a third possibility. Okay. So, however you want to translate that, it still comes to the same point. There is a third possibility, a third way of seeing things. And then he says, likewise, a mere lack of involvement in the two selves does not entail that you are involved in the two selflessnesses. So just not being involved in or engaging in, I think is how Jeffrey translated it, not engaged in. Oh, he says also involved, Yeah, so just not being involved in either of the two selves doesn't mean that you're involved in the two selflessnesses. There are countless mental states in the third category. So this is kind of what we were talking about last week. And the example given by Khensa Jamba Tekchok, and you mentioned which, like on page 86. So I thought to just read that because he also says something that's really helpful. There's this Tibetan word zin, which it's usually translated as apprehend, but it's also translated as grasp, and it does mean like hold. It just means hold. So it could. So what Khensa Jamba Tekchok says is, he says this term zin can have two meanings. One is simply apprehend in the sense of understand an object. Like you apprehend a tree. Your eye consciousness apprehends a tree, meaning you see a tree, you understand that it's a tree. So just like a mind understanding its object. But that same term can also mean grasp, like at a false appearance of a self or a tree. So they use that same term for grasping at inherent existence, grasping at true existence. So it can have both of those meanings, and it can be a little confusing sometimes. And so in the book, starting on page 86, he explains these two meanings using two different minds with regard to our I, our self. So he says, the valid conventional mind that apprehends the conventionally existing I is the mind that thinks, I'm coming, I'm going, I'm eating, I'm practicing Dharma. Okay, so when we just have, a sense of ourself doing those things, this is a valid conventional mind. And it's seeing the I that exists conventionally. The erroneous mind that incorrectly grasps the I as inherently existent keeps us bound in cyclic existence and is therefore extremely harmful. So there's two different minds about ourself. One apprehends the I, uses the term apprehend, it understands, the conventionally existent I, and that's okay. We do exist. There is a person here who eats and sleeps and meditates and works and goes to enlightenment and becomes enlightened eventually. And so there's a mind that understands that I, and that's okay. But then there's this other mind that's erroneous, that's wrong, and that's the one that grasps at an inherently existing I. It sort of superimposes inherently existing I on top of the conventionally existing I and believes in that, grasps at that. That is the one that's harmful. That's the one we want to get rid of, that mind. It says, the valid I apprehending mind is not erroneous. It is a valid mind because there is an I that is the agent of actions. There's an I that comes here and goes there, an I that is reborn in this realm and goes to that realm after death. This I apprehending mind apprehends the I that exists, and that mind is valid, whereas the innate I grasping mind grasps a truly existent I that does not exist at all. And that mind is erroneous and distorted. So there's two different minds. And I mean, the Tibetan term is the same Tibetan term used for both. But you just have to understand that in one case, it's actually valid. But in the other case, it's invalid. It's erroneous. So or maybe it was Venerable Chudran, when she edited this, used two different terms: apprehend for when it's correct, and grasp for when it's incorrect.
The conventionally existent I that I walk, I sleep, is still a mistaken, because we still see it as inherently existent, right? We're not really seeing the conventional, merely labeled I totally.
Well, he's gonna, next part I read is he's explaining how the process of how it goes.
Okay.
But it's true, even when we have this valid mind, valid conventional mind that apprehends the I, that I does appear truly existent. Because for sentient beings, every single mind that we have, with one exception, the Arya's meditative voice on emptiness, every other mind of a sentient being always sees things as truly existent. Things always appear truly existing. But that doesn't mean we always grasp it. That's the point he's making here. Not every single mind that we have is actually grasping at inherent existence. So inherent existence appears, but we don't always grasp it as inherently existent. So here's the sequence of how the I apprehending and the I grasping manifest according to the Prasangika system. First, the aggregates, which are the basis of designation of I, appear to our minds. The aggregates are a valid basis of designation of I, and in dependence on them, we impute I. As soon as the I is imputed, the I apprehending mind arises. Its object is the mere I that exists by being merely labeled, in dependence on the continuity of the aggregates or in dependence on the aggregates. It is a valid mind. After that, in some but not all cases, the I grasping mind will arise. That's the erroneous one. To both the valid I apprehending mind and the erroneous I grasping mind, you actually don't have to write this down, it's in the book, page 86, 87. Anyway, you can see it in there. So after that, to both the valid I apprehending mind and the erroneous I grasping mind, the I appears to exist from its own side. So it's always appearing to exist from its own side. But the valid mind does not think the I is inherently existing, even though that is how it appears. It does not assent to or agree with that appearance, although it doesn't disagree with or refute it either. So this is probably the third one he mentions here, this third possibility where, the I appears truly existing, but the mind doesn't grasp at it, assent to it, buy into it, believe it. But it also doesn't disprove it. It doesn't refute it. So it's just kind of more like a neutral mind, neutral, indifferent towards the appearance of inherent existence. Where was I? However, in the case of the I grasping mind, not only does the I appear as if it exists from its own side, exists inherently, but that mind also thinks there is an inherently existing I. It believes that the appearance of an inherently existing I is true. It assents to and agrees with that appearance and thus grasps at an inherently existing I. So that would be, in this section we just read, that would be the first one. The first of those three possibilities, the apprehension of the observed object is truly existent. So in our case, we could have the first one, number one, and we could have number three. Number two, maybe not. Maybe some of you have realized emptiness. You have, but we haven't realized emptiness, then we haven't got number two yet. But we can have number one, we can have number three. So he says, in the case of us ordinary sentient beings, sometimes it seems that the afflictive I-grasping mind leads to anger without the valid I-apprehending mind arising first. Sometimes it's like we go straight to anger. We don't have a valid I. We go straight from I-grasping to anger and we don't have any valid one. This is a false impression. In this case, the valid I-apprehending mind lasts only a moment. So it does come up, but very fast. And then quickly, he says, the innate I-grasping follows very quickly afterwards. And then he gives this example. For example, while Jim is sitting in a relaxing place and reading a book, he thinks simply, I'm reading. So that would be the third mind. Just not grasping inherently existing I, nor thinking it's not inherent existing, but just the neutral one. I'm reading a book. At this time, the valid I-apprehending mind is manifest, as it often is due to habit or tendencies. the afflictive eye-grasping mind has not arisen. Then suddenly something happens. Someone walks in and insults him or strikes him. Initially, there is a moment of the valid eye-apprehending mind, but it is followed very quickly by the innate eye-grasping. Now, the I not only appears inherently existing, but Jim also grasps it as inherently existent. Then, due to habit and tendencies, he gets angry. So I think that's a nice explanation of, how our mind can have both a valid eye-apprehending mind, even though the I still appears truly existing, but our mind isn't grasping at it. So that's there sometimes, especially when we're relaxed and peaceful. But then we can have the other kind of mind, grasping at an inherently existing I. And that can lead to afflictions. Any questions?
So let's say that we're meditating on one of the four measurables and we have a very, very deep sense of that person understanding, recognizing that, so that there's a very strong feeling that arises.
You're meditating
On
love,
love, equanimity.
Okay, so you got an object there.
Right, it's the four measurables.
Yeah.
Right. And then through the process of meditation, there's this very, very strong sense that you are really getting to understand what this feeling of love is all about. So we're not in neutral territory. Are we just still invalid that this merely labeled I is having the strong experience, or are we getting it to, depending on whether we get attached to that experience, is whether the grasping shows up or not? I mean, can you have a virtuous, state of mind without the grasping, or does it?
Oh, yeah.
But if the attachment arises to the outcome, like, oh gosh, good, I know what love's all about now.
Yeah, an inherently existing I is realized.
I think inherently existent love.
Yeah. Yeah, towards an inherently existing person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he explains it using an affliction, a situation where, affliction arises. But virtuous, I don't think... Yeah, because if it's a virtuous state of mind, if there's a virtuous state of mind, it would not be possible, I think, to have the grasping. Because that's, I don't know, I'd have to check this. What do you think? Grasping at an inherently existing I, actually grasping at it, not just, the valid I apprehending mind, but actually grasping at that. I'm not sure if that can coexist with a virtuous state of mind. I need to think about that.
I could imagine a situation where someone has the acquired wrong view of believing that, they have a soul. And so the person is engaging in a nominally virtuous action of, say, charity work, generosity. And so they would have a virtuous mind except for the fact that they have this view that, okay, this is beneficial for my soul. I will go to heaven because of that. So that seems like that might be a virtuous mind where some grasping is still there. Yes?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, they do say, as long as we're ordinary sentient beings, even when we do virtuous actions, we have virtuous states of mind, we do virtuous actions, there's still ignorance underlying. But is it actually grasping, actively grasping? I don't know, that's a good question.
That's why we're advised to pick an object that we're not already attached to if we're going to be cultivating love, because it can so easily slip into something else.
But I'm saying, even if there isn't attachment there, even if you don't have attachment for that object that you're meditating on loving kindness for, if an affliction isn't present, then, in fact, if an affliction was present, it wouldn't be virtuous. You can't have well, no, that's not true. you can't have an afflictive state of mind and a virtuous state of mind. You can't have a non-virtuous state of mind and a virtuous state of mind at the same time, but it can still be afflicted. There's a difference between affliction and non-virtue. Complicated. This is too much for my little mind right now. But it's a good point. You can think about it, look for possible answers, and bring it up again next week.
Someone online is asking, is it the meaning generality of the self that has to be proven to not exist? Isn't this the merely existing self? So, is it the meaning generality of the self that has to be proven to not exist? Isn't this the merely existing self?
Well, I mean, this erroneous apprehension of inherent existence, like, an inherently existing I, that's always a conceptual mind. It's never a direct perception. So conceptual minds always have a meaning generality of whatever object they are perceiving, conceiving, experiencing. So there's always a meaning generality of the object. But I don't think what we're trying to get rid of is just the meaning generality. It's the meaning generality for conceptual mind is the appearing object. And they say that what we're trying to get rid of, what we have to refute, is the conceived object. Let me just check the chart. Conceived object. Because again, there's this problem of many different English translations for Tibetan words. Conceived object. Yeah, sometimes that's called a referent object. So, like for the conception of true existence, the view of the transitory collection. Okay, so the conceived object or referent object of the view of the transitory collection is a truly existent I or mine. And the appearing object is the meaning generality of the truly existent I or mine. Okay. So when they talk about what we have to refute, it's the conceived object. It's not the meaning generality. But that conceived object always appears via a meaning generality. So that's what we need to refute. What was the second part of that question? You've answered that question. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if we can finish anymore. Yeah, we're not going to finish this section today. Any last questions?
Clearly, there are times when I'm so afflicted that I can recognize it. And I have so much attachment or anger, it's very obvious. But then there's other times that there's something in the mind I can tell, but I can't identify which affliction it is. So I guess my question is, how can we, in a more subtle way, identify when there's an affliction? Because if there's an affliction, there's definitely the ignorance as well.
Yeah, so you're asking how to identify when
like
there is
more,
affliction or which affliction it is.
More of when the mind is afflicted in a more subtle way. Because it seems like it would be very helpful to know earlier.
Well, I think just practicing, cultivating mindfulness and clear knowing, or that's one translation, but we usually call it introspective awareness, vigilance, discriminating alertness. There's different terms for that. Sheshin in Tibetan, that mental factor that is able to, like the spy, the spy or the guard, the security guard, that can recognize trouble. So we have to cultivate those two, but also cultivate our understanding of the afflictions. And there are different levels. There's really gross anger, but then just subtler forms of that are dislike, aversion, even unhappiness. Even when there's some feeling of being unhappy, there's probably some form of anger going on there. And I found it really helpful once listening to a talk by Ajahn Brahm when he was talking about those 5 hindrances. And he defined ill will, one of the 5 hindrances. Ill will, he defined it as the fault-finding mind, the mind that finds faults in things. And I found that so helpful because I've got tons of that. Like all the time. Finding fault in yourself, in other people, in things around you. I mean, just anything, your mind could find a fault with. And so that, I found that really helpful. I was in retreat, so it was a good time to become aware of that and just notice how frequent that was. Oh, that's ill will, okay. And so that's like a really subtle level of anger. And then with attachment, even just a feeling of happiness, of liking, could be, a subtle form of attachment. So I think as we just get to know our minds better, and also from, listening to teachings and reading, studying, hearing, or learning about examples of these different mental factors, that can help us recognize, oh yeah, I have that one too. So I think it's just a process as time goes on to get to know your mind, but also get to know the teachings and more subtle layers and levels of these. Pema.
Just a small note of the Zin, which is His Holiness's name, Tenzin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when he talks about the holder of the Buddhist teaching, he's talking about Zen.
Yeah, so it's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. So that word is not a bad word.
No, only when it's Denzin instead of Tenzin. And Denzin is grasping at true existence. That's what we don't want. But Tenzin, yes, we definitely want that.
I'm not sure if this is entirely related to Venerable Semke's point earlier in Venerable Rinchen, but in Volume 3 of Library of Wisdom and Compassion, it does point out that any action instigated by ignorance is the cause of samsara, even though the motivation may be virtuous, such as the similitude of the determination to be free from samsara or the compassionate wish to help someone. Actions sustained by the power of the basis, referring to actions involving holy objects, are exceptions to this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then when we heard His Holiness teach on this in South India, both Venerable Children and I were like, huh? Does that mean that there's something inherently existent from the holy object side?
Oh, this is in Lamrim Chenmo.
Right, yeah.
And I think Geshe Sopa makes some comments about it in his text. I can't remember exactly what he says, but they do say, yeah, there's the power of holy objects. But I think the way they explain it is because of the vast merit created by the Buddha. He created so much merit and, this huge amount of merit. Because of that, then these images, stupas and statues and so on, are imbued with so much positive energy that just looking at them or touching them or walking around them, even if you don't have a virtuous motivation, it still becomes, it can become the cause of enlightenment. Someone else, did you? Okay. Okay, so it's time to stop. So let's dedicate.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.